Packers Cowboys, another great game. The game goes to overtime. Nice little primetime national TV spot. Packers win this game. They go to 4-6. Kind of feels like maybe too little too late. Niners winning tonight. They still have like a 15% chance to make the playoffs, according to 538. You guys can look at other playoff odds. I'm sure they're not too optimistic about what Green Bay can do from here. It's kind of how it feels to me. This is a good version of the Packers. I think that the offensive mix that they had is what I want to see from them. But again, still feels like it's going to be too much of an uphill battle for them to do much from here.
Did you look at the box score? Do you know Aaron Rodgers' stat line?
He was 14 of 20.
20 passes. That's nuts in an overtime game. Like, talking about the balance, like they were basically 2-1 rush to pass, which is nuts. And Rodgers had those deep passes to Watson that they finally connect on and everyone's all excited about. But
that's what they should be, though.
Strange. Yeah, I know. It's strange to think that like this is the way they have to play football with Aaron Rodgers at quarterback in that scheme.
Against this team specifically, I think that's exactly what you have to do. And well, we can talk about that. I think that against the best version of the Cowboys offense, defense, this is what you'd want to do. I don't think that version existed today. Well, we can get into that a little bit. But Rodgers making 4, 5, 6 throws that are just insane, combined with them running the ball really efficiently, which they've done all year. Even if you've been concerned about the state of their passing game, they've run the ball well, especially with Jones. And then him making the throw he made to Watson down the right sideline for the touchdown. The throw he made to Watson that should have been another touchdown on the right sideline, but Watson slowed down. The one he made to Watkins that he essentially put in his face mask on the right sideline. I mean, and then the RPO to Lazard. Like, you just need him to make that handful of throws each game, play well in defense, and run the ball. I think that's exactly what they need to do based on the personnel that they have. He also played better today. Like, that's the frustrating part about talking about the Packers this year is that you're like, man, what's wrong? And the receiving talent just isn't there. And they look so disjointed on offense. And a lot of it comes down to the quarterback just wasn't playing very well. And he played better today. It's not any more complicated than that sometimes.
Yeah, and it's hard. I mean, clearly his thumb's affecting him. Like, there are some passes that are very atypical from him. I don't think physically he would have dropped off enough from back-to-back MVP seasons to be making some of the really, really, really strange throws that we've just not seen from him really in his entire career. Like, he has the best TD to interception ratio in NFL history. Now, a lot of that is by choice because he chooses not to, kind of force the ball into spots.
Yes.
But it's also because he has exceptional accuracy and he can throw it exactly where he wants it most of the time. And we've just seen these kind of squirrely passes that come out funky and that are, off by 5-8 yards, and they're just not typical, like that pass to Bakhtiari, from the week before. It's a casual flick of the wrist that he probably completes every single time. And I guarantee in practice, that ball is placed in the back half of the end zone and it's very easy and it's catchable. And the thumb just doesn't seem fully there. It did seem like it took a step in the right direction. Like you said, he played better today. And part of that is he made Aaron Rodgers throws and he zipped it in there and he put it, exactly like you said, into guys' faces where they were forced to catch the ball. So that's a really positive development. But it seems strange that this is the version that they need to, kind of produce. And like you said, against Dallas, but this is essentially the way the NFC is going to go. This is what they're going to need in the playoffs to be successful. The counterpoint is they just prove that they can go up against one of, the better teams in that conference rather, and play the kind of football that is successful once you get into the winter months. And, the physicality up front on both sides of the ball, being able to control things, pick and choose your spots to throw downfield, throw it accurately, and then the crazy Aaron Rodgers plays. So a bit of a positive development and, still not super excited about this team for the long term. How do you feel about it?
Well, I think about the short term, about 2022, I still feel like they're way too far to go. They probably won't make the playoffs. And I think that's why losing to Detroit last week, losing that game they lost to the Giants, all those close ones, that's why they're heartbreakers, because you didn't give yourself a chance to right the ship. We're going to talk about the Bucs here in a bit. It's exactly what happened. Just based on the state of the division, they were allowed to have some shitty moments over the first half of the season, and it didn't really matter because they're still going to make the playoffs. The Packers just didn't get that sort of break because of how well the Vikings are playing, or what the Vikings record is, I guess. So that's the frustrating part. I will say, if they continue to play well down the stretch, maybe it changes the complexion of stuff for 2023. Rather than saying, do we need to move on from him? Is that the best plan? We can, based on the way that contract is structured. If you get to the end of the season, you say our best chance to do something over the next year with this core is to keep him, and that gives us our best shot. maybe this trajectory and more games like this will lead you to that conclusion by the end of the year.
Yeah, and we'll see. I mean, I think the most encouraging part, we've talked about kind of the balance on the offensive side of the ball, what they needed to do. They got down 24 or 28 to 14 in the third quarter. The game was tied. They come out of the half. Dallas scores, I think, in the middle of the third quarter and then towards the end of the third quarter. And it felt like, all right, Green Bay, they stayed with them in the first half. Dallas is starting to pull away. The offense looks
Ran out of
good. The
gas.
defense is doing what they need to do. And Green Bay came back and they fought back and they tied it and they got the game to overtime and they won. And I have my cool setup so I don't have to turn any game off physically, but like that was the game I was ready to, take my attention away from and just, all right, this one's over. And, Green Bay is kind of who we thought they were based on the first couple months of the season. And so I think that ability to fight back, despite a couple testy moments from Rodgers on the sideline. And I completely agree with him. I mean, that end of game scenario where Green Bay basically just runs the ball, chooses a play on third down that Aaron Rodgers is clearly not too happy about. Comes to the sideline, cusses out LaFleur, and they basically just give up and go to overtime. I thought that was really strange, and I couldn't quite tell if that was like, hey, I don't actually trust my offense. I don't really think these guys can, go down the field and not need to punt with a minute and a half left for Dallas and to give them the ball right back. I thought that was kind of one of those odd situations that even in this victory, you could kind of look at that as all right, things are still pretty messed up there. And there's still, this huge disconnect between quarterback and head coach.
His just general demeanor, the body language, some of the reactions. If you were on that team, how do you think you would see that? How would you process the way he's acted this year?
Man, that's a tough one because, from the exterior view, it kind of looks like, he puts himself on a certain level and he has seen that a lot of guys are beneath him and not up to his level and doing things that, he doesn't approve of. And then, really the worst thing you can do is become that guy who kind of sows disconnect between the coaches and the players. And when your leader and the guy who just got the biggest contract and quarterback in NFL history on an annual average salary basis is openly defiant of the head coach, when he gets in his moods and pouts and looks very disconnected from everything, like that has a big effect on the rest of the locker room. And when you hear about cancer in the locker room, essentially that's what that looks like. It's a guy who looks disconnected, uninterested, openly criticizes the coaches, openly, kind of says, oh, we should be doing this, we could be doing that. The past few weeks, it's actually kind of led me to this little thought in my head that, Rodgers obviously thinks highly of himself. He's talked about, he called that. Yeah, he called the Matt Flynn game that Flynn had like 6 touchdowns. I forget which random Green Bay quarterback that was that put up 6 TDs and got a big contract and flamed out. Yeah, so like he called that game. Of course he did. It's interesting to me that the play comes into Rodgers' ear and he doesn't switch it. Like he seems really okay with just calling the play, knowing it's going to fail, and kind of spiting LaFleur over it. And like he seems like the kind of guy that the play would come in and he would just choose a different one because he trusts it better and he thinks that's the better chance to win. So it's this like little thought that's been in my head of kind of how to parse that out between this guy who is happy enough to just like have this play that fails and be able to yell at his coach, but also a guy who thinks he's this brilliant kind of thoughtful guy and can call a great game and understands everything about football. And seems exactly like someone who would defy his coach and just call a better quote unquote play in his head at the line of scrimmage. And I don't know quite how to parse that, but I figured you'd be the guy to talk about that too. Cause it seems like he would just get a call and be like, nah, this isn't going to work. I'm just going to call my thing. But every time it's 3rd and short, he just runs the play and then he goes back to the sidelines and cusses his coach out.
It's so hard as someone who just wants to analyze this stuff from what scheme are they running? Are they doing things the right way? Is this the right offense to be running for your players? Oh, that was the right play call in that situation. And in talking about the Packers, you have to consistently psychoanalyze the motivations and emotions of the quarterback. And it's just like, I don't know how to do it. I don't know how to properly say like, well, the Packers are struggling because their quarterback is in this sort of mood. But in order to actually talk about them and evaluate them properly, you probably have to take that into consideration.
And you shouldn't have to do that after he, held the team hostage in the offseason and forced them to give him this awesome
Multiple
contract.
years.
Yeah, I mean, I was trying to be nice there. But he finally got that crazy contract that, kind of hamstrung them to do other things. And then he'll get upset because they don't bring in certain guys or they don't draft certain players. And it's like, well, you're the biggest cap hit in NFL history. And we have to kind of figure this out because you're choosing to be the highest paid guy over taking a little bit less money or not being the absolute highest paid so we can spend a little more on receivers or do this. And, the narrative of Devontae wanting to go play with Carr, the more we kind of see things, the more it might just be he kind of needed a break from Rodgers too, and his old friend from college looked like the right guy to get back with. So yeah, it's kind of crappy that we're at this place that we have to analyze his mood and what he's thinking, how he's acting on the sidelines. This looks a lot like the end of the McCarthy area and why they moved on from McCarthy. It looks a little bit like that first year with LaFleur, where even though they went 13-3, they still hadn't quite figured each other out, and there was still a
They
little bit of that
absolutely
back
had
and
not.
forth. Yeah, and obviously they figured it out the last couple of years, and now it seems like the power has shifted a bit back to Rodgers, and maybe he's got a bit too much influence, like you said, when you're looking at the schematics and what fits the players, what fits the team. It seems like the pendulum has definitely swung back towards catering more to Rodgers than it is to kind of stick to the LaFleur offense.
Let's talk about the Cowboys a little bit. After watching this game, I'm a little bit concerned about the defense. And when you take out a couple specific pieces, I think you saw the impact of that today. Losing Anthony Barr feels huge because it moves Micah Parsons away from rushing the passer all the time. And I do think that really matters when you're talking about this team's ceiling on defense and how scary they can be play in and play out. I also think that losing Jordan Lewis to IR, replacing him with Bland, his last name is Bland, which I feel is just unfortunate. I think it's number 26, and he's now their nickel. And I think that showed up in a couple big moments today when, I think that the Watson completion on that crosser Bland was on him. And then having Calvin Joseph come in because Anthony Brown got hurt in this game. You're down 2 starting corners. You're down a starting linebacker who moves your best player out of position for at least some situational stuff. So now we're starting to chip away at the idea of what the Cowboys defense is. And that leaves me a little bit worried about their standing in this entire NFC conversation.